Hi everyone, Tzaran Tovim. This week I'm going to discuss Parshat VaYakhel, and I've called this a house or a home as a reflection of ourselves. And I apologize, I'm a little sniffly and sneezy. Okay, I think I got 2 of the 7 dwarfs. Anyway, one of the nicest compliments I've ever received about our family home was about 25 years ago when the required home study was completed for the adoption of our son, Brian Victor, from the former Soviet Union. The social worker wrote, after spending time in our home with our family, including at the time my husband and our 3 daughters before the arrival of our youngest child, our son, quote, "This is both a beautifully directed and decorated and well-kept house, while simultaneously being a welcoming and warm home," end of quote. Indeed, we do have beautiful art, a wonderful collection of Judaica, lovely furnishings, and well put together rooms. But the real value of these spaces is the activity that happens within them, that brings them alive and helps serve as a backdrop for the experiences and ultimately the memories that become part of our family lore. I take pride much more in the home we have created than I do in the house we have put together, per se. And this is as it should be. This is how our Parsha begins. Moshe calls the entire community. VaYakhel Moshe et kol edot b'nei Yisrael. So first of all, we know we're having a big gathering here, and says to them, these are the things that God commanded to make. This is exactly done in a way that was not commanded and did not serve. This was exactly after, they acted in a way that was not commanded and did not serve the best interests of the collective, namely the experience of the Egel HaMasecha. Then, right after this, we read, Sheshet Yamim Taseh Malacha V'Yom HaShvi'i Yeh Lachem Kodesh Shabbat Shabbaton L'Ad Hashem Kol Ha'aseh Bo Malacha Yumat. 6 days you may work, but on the 7th day you will have sanctity, a day of complete rest to God. Anyone who performs work on those days, Yumat, will be put to death. You will not kindle fire in any of your dwelling places on the Shabbat day. Why is Shabbat spoken of here? Because precisely it is the reason that all are being brought together to celebrate and be and live together as a unit, as a community, having a relationship with each other, individually, collectively, and of course with God. Similarly to our home, where so much attention goes into Shabbat meals, Chagim preparations, and the experiences that will become part of all of the people in our circles, memory banks, we hope. The Parsha continues. Moshe spoke to the entire community, saying, this is the word that God has commanded to say. Zeh hadavar asher tzivah Hashem limor. Take from yourselves an offering for the Lord. Every generous-hearted person shall bring it. The Lord's offering, gold, silver, copper, blue, purple, crimson wool, linen, goat hair, ram skins, v'chule, v'chule, v'chule. Now, we've seen this before. And then we read, V'chol chacham lev bachem, this is in verse 10, and every wise-hearted person amongst you shall come and do everything the way God has commanded. Notice we are talking about the motivations here. Every nediv libo, which we see in verse 5, take from yourselves an offering to God, every generous-hearted person, kol nediv libo, v'chol chacham lev. So the focus here is on the nediv libo, the one who is generous of heart, the chacham lev, and also wise of heart, to give generously and from one's heart, and to use the elements properly and wisely for the intended purpose that will bring together the community and make from the individuals a celebratory collective. I remember when my kids were very young, one Shabbat night, for whatever reason, we were having dinner in the kitchen and we didn't have guests, and that was unusual. And one of my kids started to cry, Mommy, it's Shabbat. Where are the guests? Where are all the fancy dishes? It was probably a very early Shabbat in the winter. Maybe there was illness involved. Who knows? But they knew that Shabbat was important and that it was a regularly scheduled activity that was special. And I love the fact that in my 3 daughters' homes, which they have created, that is still the case. We then continue. The Mishkan, its tent, its cover, its clasps, the ark, its poles, the table, its poles. Everything is set just so. Imagine all of the arrangements that go into the Rosh Hashanah dinner or the Pesach dinner. As I explained to my non-Jewish friends, when everybody begins to go a little cuckoo around Thanksgiving, I go, just consider that we do Thanksgiving every single week, and sometimes multiple times a week, depending on the schedule. Notice the specificity of these instructions that are repeated from earlier texts. Sandwiched between Parshat Truma, where we read these instructions previously, and our Parsha of VaYakhel is Parshat Ki Tisa, with its Egel Masecha. Here there was individual angst, group panic, and a general loss of the comfort of feeling home, if you will. Now Moshe brings everyone together after the Egel Masecha to restore this feeling and to repeat what makes the difference between a generic structure, a house in our understanding, and a meaningful, participatory, and shared entity, the home. This is what the Mishkan was intended to be, and this is what it will be, with the intentional participation and involvement of all. As Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Shalom, teaches, what Moshe had to do after the golden calf was VaYakhel, turn the Israelites back into a kihila, a community. He did this in the obvious sense of restoring order. When Moshe came down the mountain and saw the calf, the Torah says the people were puah, meaning wild, disorderly, chaotic, unruly, tumultuous. He saw that the people were running wild and that Aaron had let them get out of control, and so became a laughingstock to their enemies. They were not a community, but a crowd, an unwieldy one at that. He did it in a more fundamental sense, as we see in the rest of the Parsha. He began by reminding the people of the laws of Shabbat. He then instructed them to build the Mishkan, the sanctuary, as the symbolic home for God at all times. VaYakhel is no ordinary episode in the history of Israel. It marks the essential insight to emerge from the crisis of the Egel Masecha. We find God in community. We develop virtue, strength of character, and a commitment to the common good in community. Community is local. It is society with a human face. It is not government. It is not the people we pay to look after the welfare of others. It is the work that we ourselves do together for each other. Community is the antidote to individualism on the one hand and the over-reliance on the state on the other. Darwin understood its importance to human flourishing. Tocqueville saw its role in protecting democratic freedom. Robert Putnam has documented its value in sustaining social capital and common good. And it began in our Parsha, when Moshe turns the unruly mob from the Egel HaZahav into a kihila, a community, with its Mishkan and its Shabbat. As I explained, I believe, last week, and I even did a little bit of show and tell, yes, we have the beautiful candlesticks, the mezuzot, the special dishes, all of that. But it's not to be put in a museum. It's to be used on Shabbat, on Chagim, in our gatherings. That's what makes our house a home. Individuals can gather in any public space. But it is when those individuals are inherently meaningful to one another and establish connectivity that we feel we have created a home. In my work with Eshel, we are always trying to find a home for our LGBT observant Jews. Not just a place where they can go in and leave and nobody notices or whatever, but they need a home. They need a sense of belonging, as we all do. And I love speaking to rabbis. I spoke to an amazing one this morning who agree that their job, that their tafkid, their purpose as the leader of their community is to create that home. This is what we mean when we say, I feel like I belong. I am welcomed. I am embraced. This is my home. Something we aspire to feel with our families, our shul communities, and other intentional collectives of which we are part. I often deal in my multi-faith world and in various aspects of my life with groups where I feel a certain solitary identity within the collective. But people ask me, why can you do that, or how can you do that? And it's very easy, because I have home. I have lots of homes. I have what we call my peeps, my people. And I know that they are there for me. And this gives me the strength to reach beyond the bandwidth and to go into other spaces. As our Parsha continues, we read, verse 21. VaYavou kol ish asher nasu libo. Every man came with an uplifted heart, and their spirit inspired them. Nidva ruchot. Again, that's word nadiv, which is generosity, to inspire. And they brought all of the things to the building of the Mishkan for the service, for the holy garments. Clearly, this is all about personal investment and intentionality. The men came with the women. VaYavou anashim al hanashim. Everybody came together with these offerings. Everyone is active and engaged. As a woman who is Orthodox, identified in many ways, although some others, maybe not so much. In terms of observance, yes, but in terms of a lot of the ways I look at community and what have you, it's hard to find those communities a lot of times, though I am extremely grateful for the one that we belong to in Center City, Makor HaBracha, and wonderful Rabbi Eliezer Hirsch, and the many other rabbis who are creating communities as he is, and Rabbi Zushi Gurvitz at Chabad in Elkins Park as well. It is important to feel like you matter. Not just that you're there. And again, I daven with a mechitza. So there's a difference between being hidden behind a mechitza versus being with the women in a collective for halachic reasons, another time, another place for discussion. But it's something that I subscribe to. And I want to feel involved. I want to feel like I matter. I want to feel like I belong. I want to feel like I'm home. I think that's a fair thing. So when we read VaYavou anashim al anashim, that the men and the women came together, kol nadiv lev, again, that phrase, nadiv lev, generous of heart, bringing the bracelets and the earrings and the rings and the buckles and golden objects. Everyone comes. At one point, as the men and the women are repeated again, v'chol isha chachmat lev, every woman who is wise of heart, brought the materials, the fabrics, if you will. They are using their skill sets to help create their communal homes, not just to observe, but to be embraced and find their place in it. And all the women whose hearts uplifted them, notice, women are very present in making this home. The home can only be made by all of them, not by just some of them. So everybody brought what they were to bring. The princes bring, the priests bring what they're supposed to bring. Every man and woman, again we read, Kol ish v'isha asher nadav liban. This is repeated several times in our Parsha. They bring with their generosity the work so that they can all be involved. Later in chapter 36, we see the communal effect of all this participation. We read in verses 4 through 7. VaYavou kol hachachamim ha'osim et kol melechet hakodesh, ish mimalachto asher hema asim. All the wise men who were doing the work of this holy enterprise came, each one from his work, which he had been doing, and they spoke to Moshe, and they say, Marbim ha'am lahavim idai. They've brought enough. We have more than what we need. They need to stop bringing so much stuff. These Nadivei Lev, all these wise-hearted and these generous-hearted, we can't continue with more materials. We're done. So Moshe announces, Vayitzav Moshe, Vayirok kol b'machaneh, his voice is heard in the entire camp. Ish v'isha al yasuod. Every man and woman, you have done plenty. Do not do any more. We don't need anything else for the building of the Mishkan. Vayikelu ha'am mehevi. and the group of the people stopped bringing. The work was sufficient for them, for all the work, to do it, and there was even leftovers. We make our beautiful Shabbat meals, and I don't know about you, but we end up eating leftovers during the week a lot of times. The assigned Haftarah for Parshat VaYakhel, which once again is only read sometimes given various calendar-oriented considerations, continues in the construction theme. The Ashkenazic custom is to read the verses that list all of the pieces that Hiram, the king of Tyre, a talented bronze worker, created for the temple, including 2 columns with 2 globes, 400 pomegranates, pails, scrapers, and sprinkling bowls. Next, we read about the gold furnishings that Shlomo made for the temple, the altar, the candelabra, the basins, the ladles, the doors. Yes, they were to be objects of beauty with very defined and scripted specifications, but more importantly, they were to be used in celebrations and shared usage, not to just be looked at, much like you would look at something in a museum. The Sephardic Haftarah for VaYakhel begins earlier in the same chapter with a bit of background explaining who Hiram was. His father had been a Tyrian, a coppersmith. He was endowed with skill, ability, and talent for executing all work in bronze. Here again, we see the notion of intentionality. This was not a quick fix, like the Egel HaMasecha, but rather a processed and careful, instructed undertaking. Let us focus on these few verses, chapter 7, verses 13 through 14, in our Haftarah. And King Solomon goes and fetches Hiram out of Tyre. He was a widow's son of the tribe of Naphtali. His father was a man of Tyre, a coppersmith, and he was filled with wisdom and understanding and skill. To do all of this work in copper. And he came to King Solomon and wrought all his work. Remember in our Parsha, the generous of heart, the wise of heart, all the men, all the women, understanding all that. We see that mirrored here. Again, we're making a very intentional place for an intentional purpose that must follow intentional dynamics. What's interesting here is the word for coppersmith that is given is choresh. Choresh is a very interesting word. It means so many different things. It means deaf or mute. It means plowing. It means lots of different things. But usually the word is uman. So this root that means to plow, to work the ground, in this case the material, maybe this word is being used instead of the conventional uman to indicate the degree of understanding and ability to do this work with precision, meaning, and greater understanding. In other words, it's a more specific word than uman. He was filled with the wisdom and understanding, Rashi says. These are the 3 tools by which the universe was created, as it is stated. From Proverbs, we read this. The Lord, by wisdom, founded the earth. By understanding, God established the heavens. And by knowledge, the depths were broken up. With these same 3 elements, the Mishkan and later the Beit HaMikdash is built. Remember that in our Parsha, we are talking about the qualities of people involved in this enterprise, not so much the technical skill sets, which are also there. More is required here, both in our Haftarah for the Beit HaMikdash and for the generous and wise-hearted in our Parsha in building the Mishkan. Think of it this way. I sew, and I do stained glass art for fun. Those are my hobbies. It feels totally different when someone remarks on a piece of art or clothing that I bought, no matter how carefully or meticulously chosen to add to the ambiance of my home or personal appearance, as opposed to when someone says they like a mezuzah casing or a challah plate that I crafted or a dress that I designed and made. The investment of personal effort is important and meaningful, and this was to be the case for the Mishkan as well as the Beit HaMikdash. Each person could say, I was involved in this, and this is part of me, and I am part of it. I have spent many, many, many years in schools, And I love going in schools and seeing displays that kids have made, that the hands of the students have crafted. It's not your, super design from some great artist out there, but it's the meaningful collaboration of the people that are part of the community. I was involved. This is part of me, and I am part of it. I helped to make this home. This created a true dwelling and a sense of an appropriate place for the Shekhinah of God to rest and dwell. Our daughter and son-in-law just spent more than 2.5 years to design and create their beautifully appointed house. That is an exceptional home for them and their 4 daughters and their many guests for Shabbatot, Chagim, and other gatherings. Yoella loves lots of people in the home. It is the value of their home that is meaningful, and the physical attributes create their exceptional backdrop. It is the same with my daughters, Rachie and Tali, and their wives, Liz and Mimi, and adorable little Ray Aleb, and their friend Miriam and her dog, Widget. I love being in their home for Shabbat. It's done so intentionally and so beautifully. And again, beautiful spaces, artwork, lovely things, but it's the experiences that bring all of it to life. It is the meals that are so lovingly prepared that contribute so much to the experience of these gatherings. This is the value of our efforts and the meaning of why the instructions are given here in our Parsha, once again, after the Egel HaZahav and in the accompanying Haftarah. While the Mishkan was a temporary home and the Beit HaMikdash was intended to be a permanent home, as we know, this did not play out as planned. Nonetheless, with careful instructions and consistent elements, we could always feel at home. We as Jews do exactly that. What unites us today is this continuity of home and familiar objects and familiar elements and familiar prayers and familiar customs and familiar foods, including that recipe that was passed down in your family for 5 generations. Yes, our Batei Knesset are structures. Our homes are where so much of our Jewish life happens. Some of them are simpler, and some of them are quite grand. But what happens inside is what creates home. I do not remember all of the structures of the many different synagogues and shuls I have been in, and I've been in some beautiful structures. What I do remember is the rhythm and the cadence of known prayer structures, the beauty of different minhagim of tunes, and the feeling that however beautiful the structure, it is what happens inside of it that makes me feel I am home. May we all continue to find our home, our place in our communities. Shabbat Shalom to all.